Hello and welcome to the Rested podcast, where we explore travel time rather than destinations and the joys and surprises of shared transport. My name's Mark Selby. I love the theatre of travel, discovering the stories of journeys and learning how people use their travel time. In 1942, brothers Harold and Stanley from North London were in Singapore fighting against the Japanese invasion. Harold was in the British Army, Stanley the Royal Air Force. Singapore fell. Harold became a prisoner of war and was forced to work on the Burma Railway, otherwise known as the Death Railway. Many thousands of prisoners, Allied soldiers and civilians, died in the construction of that railway link between Bangkok and Rangoon. Fortunately, the RAF managed to get Stanley out of Singapore before he was captured too. Harold's experience was horrendous. Before the war ended, he was sent with other surviving prisoners from the railway to Japan on a cargo ship to undertake more forced labour there. The journey was hazardous, with the ship having to avoid attacks by American submarines. Harold landed, did his forced labour, and was only released as the war ended. He was then sent to New Zealand to recuperate. There, he was impressed by the kindness of the people and the country he saw. Once he was deemed fit enough to travel, he was sent home to London for further care. But, as with other survivors, the scars of his ordeals were deep. In 1948, he decided he'd leave England and return to New Zealand to start a new life. He bought a £10 ticket offered by the New Zealand government to encourage immigration. The ticket covered the one-way cost of the journey by sea. In return, he agreed to undertake work allocated by the government for 2 years. Returning to England any earlier required repayment of the full cost of the trip. But Harold never left the shores of New Zealand again. His brother Stanley emigrated from the UK with him. On the voyage, Harold met Joyce, who was heading out to work as a nurse. Romance blossomed. They later married and started a family. Harold and Stanley trained as teachers, with Harold becoming a headmaster at several schools around the country. Harold and Stanley were my uncles. As a child, I met Stanley on 2 trips he made to the UK. I was entranced by his tales of New Zealand, and only regret the time it took me to visit this extraordinary country and reunite with my 3 surviving cousins there, and their kind hospitality. It's interesting how many listeners have told me of their own journeys to live in new, distant lands, in America, Australia, Japan, Thailand, and Brazil, to name but a few. I'll be sharing your stories in later episodes. But listener Joe in London wonders if I've become an ambassador for the New Zealand Tourist Board because I keep waxing lyrical about the country. Well, it's not perfect. There are some strange quirks the visitor might note, apart from the Kiwi kilometre I mentioned last time. Travelling around New Zealand involves driving or flying, though hiking is a major leisure activity. Arriving at Auckland's pristine airport with its wonderfully helpful staff, then driving a rental car out of the city, you can't help noticing the quality and size of the road system. It's new and it's big. It's not surprising that many roads are busy and already prone to congestion, with lots of big SUVs and pickup trucks carrying a single occupant. Given the largely rural nature of the country, the vehicles seem understandable. But on closer examination, the most off-road driving many of these pristine vehicles appear to do is in car parks. Auckland has a population of about 1.8 million people. Helsinki in Finland has a population of 1.6 million. In the last 12 months, Auckland recorded 50 traffic deaths. Helsinki reported 0. I'll just repeat that, 0. Thanks to reducing car dependency with high-quality, public and active travel alternatives. There are some interesting parallels between Finland and New Zealand. Both populations demonstrate tangible national pride, are passionate about sport, whether it's ice hockey or rugby, yet somehow give the impression they think themselves insignificant in the eyes of the rest of the world. They're not. Finland's education system and New Zealand's cultural cohesion and respect are just two examples, admired as international benchmarks. But New Zealand's transport planners seem to have prioritised cars over people and communities. There's some kind of incident on the Auckland motorway network every 20 seconds, including crashes, breakdowns, straying wildlife, or objects being dropped on the roads. This car centricity isn't limited to Auckland. Invercargill feels similar. Most of the roads we saw were well maintained. Now, given that New Zealand has about 14,000 earthquakes each year, of which about 200 are big enough to be felt, maintaining infrastructure is a significant challenge. But the lack of regional train and bus services seems bizarre. Freight and tourist trains run on a North Island line from Auckland to Wellington and in part of the South Island from Picton to Christchurch, then over Arthur's Pass to Greymouth on the west coast. Wonderful, scenic routes, but woefully inadequate services for residents of the rest of the country. At least the City Rail link in Auckland is being expanded. It's expected to double rail capacity, increase service frequency, and provide shorter travel times when it's completed. A far better investment than building more road lanes. The glorious railway station at Dunedin gives a taste of what the railways were. It was the busiest station in New Zealand, served by up to 100 trains a day. Today, the station is probably the most photographed building in the country, with its mosaic floor and porcelain friezes. Only now, it echoes to photographers posing their subjects and, just occasionally, a tourist sightseeing train. People across the country regularly voice their frustration at the lack of transport options and the resulting impacts on employment, services, and communities. Now, regarding communities, I was delighted to learn about a new company in the UK called Zimble that focuses on what they call community through mobility. Zimble offers electric car rentals by the hour without a deposit. The vehicles can be delivered to your door and be collected later. The service has already caused some households to get rid of their second car. Zimble are currently operating in Banbury and Oxford. There are no membership fees. A scheme such as this has the potential to reduce the number of cars on the roads and address the needs of more rural areas. Back in New Zealand, it's good to see the commitment of many engineers and planners to encourage transport planning decisions in the country to focus on the environment, healthy communities, and the economy. Special mentions to Bridget, Tim, Richard, and David. You know who you are. One great community asset in New Zealand is the network of public libraries across the country. Quite apart from offering good Wi-Fi access for travellers in areas of poor mobile coverage, the staff and resources in the libraries are outstanding. My special thanks to the librarian in Tarangi who went to see U2's Joshua Tree Tour concert in Brisbane. Your advice was spot on. A link with libraries could be surprisingly beneficial for Zimble. My granny travelled very little in her life, but after my grandfather passed, she decided she'd visit her distant sons and grandchildren in New Zealand. Her berth was booked, and family members went to see her off. She found she was sharing a cabin with a nurse, which gave the family some comfort that she'd have a suitable companion. Only later did we discover that the nurse had frequent flings with male passengers and crew during the journey. This necessitated Granny regularly vacating the cabin for the nurse to entertain visitors. She spent the time walking around the ship's deck for regular exercise. She chuckled as she told us stories of her trip and her time with Stanley, Harold and his family. Years later, her granddaughters did the same, but their stories were different, and there were several mentions of the bottle of rum she carried with her. No doubt she'd been led to drink by that nurse. Enjoy your travels. Thanks for listening to the Rested Podcast. Please subscribe for details of new episodes and tell your friends. I look forward to reading and sharing your travel stories. Please email restedpodcast@gmail.com. And my thanks to everyone that has contributed to Rested so far. Enjoy your travel time.